It looked as though, with Wednesday passing and that deadline, effectively the US intelligence assessing that if Vladimir Putin at that point decided that he wanted to invade, then he could. He would have all of his military assets in place. Nothing happened. But since then, I've really noticed quite a change in sort of the finger-jabbing rhetoric from both sides, with, of course, the Russians initially saying that they were moving out, that units were leaving the area and returning back to their bases. And then, of course, NATO and the US very quickly coming on and saying they've seen no sign of that. In fact, just the opposite, that more troops are be coming into the area. So from 130,000, as it was up until a week or two ago, they are now saying it's over 150,000. Backed up, of course, those ground troops by the Air Force, by the naval assets, mainly around Crimea. So some real concern. And then, of course, you have the overnight developments into this morning regarding that nursery. And this is a concern because it kind of fuels the school of thought of those analysts who believe that it's maybe just that pretext that Vladimir Putin is looking for, the excuse to go in, maybe not to invade Ukraine proper, but certainly in that area around Donbass, that area which has been for a number of years now involved in a low-level insurgency. I say a low-level insurgency, but some 15,500 Ukrainians have died in recent years as a result of that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, we heard the Secretary-General of NATO saying earlier that it's still up to Ukraine whether or not they want to join the alliance, that the alliance aren't themselves going to completely outright bar that from happening, and that the alliance will also continue to help Ukraine as a sovereign nation build up defences to protect themselves from an invasion. And I think quite rightly so, they're not backing down or giving concessions based on Putin's sabre-rattling. But it does seem to me we're stuck in stalemate. What do you think Liz Truss is going to potentially say to suggest how that can be unlocked?
I think if we're honest, Russia knows that Ukraine is not going to be joining NATO anytime soon. I mean, it can't under NATO's own guidelines because it's involved in a border dispute. Now, any country that wants to join NATO cannot do that if there's an active border dispute involving their country. Well, obviously, the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014 and then this ongoing insurgency in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine absolutely qualifies for that. So they wouldn't get into NATO. And of course, Germany, among other countries, have been reiterating the point to Russia that, it wouldn't necessarily be in the best interest of NATO for Ukraine to join at this point anyway. So I think Russia knows that it's not going to be happening anytime soon. But of course, it wants an overt announcement from NATO and from Ukraine that it just won't happen. And I don't think you're going to get that overt announcement from Ukraine, and you certainly won't from NATO. So it's whatever Russia is told in private discussions and whether that is enough for it. Or, is it really about Ukraine at the end of the day? Is it wider than that? Of course, it is. As far as Russia is concerned, also about the eastward expansion of NATO, not just the potential for Ukraine to join, but the fact that 14 Eastern European countries joined NATO in the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet Union, despite assurances, according to Russia, verbal assurances from the West, that there would be no eastward expansion of NATO. So if you take a step back, and I guess you look at it from Vladimir Putin's point of view, then perhaps you can see that maybe he has some legitimate concerns over his own security.